the United States could soon have a very different tax system. Trump administration, Donald Trump, well, they've now unveiled a list of the tax priorities for the administration. And also, meanwhile, there's been a lot of intention investigations into USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. And guess what? Well, now the Trump administration is reportedly looking to cut its worldwide staff of 10,000, actually over that, to just 300 people, just under. And in other news also, Trump has announced several new measures to protect the freedom of belief of Americans, and this also includes initiatives specifically to protect Christians from discrimination. We'll be talking about these stories and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, first off, folks, the United States, well, our tax system could see some big changes happening. This is not the total elimination of income tax that some of us were talking about, but it's something pretty well along those lines, at least on the way to it. The Trump administration has now unveiled a list of tax priorities, and this includes campaign promises like no tax on tips, as well as a lot of other reforms. And while it doesn't go so far as the near elimination of federal income tax that some have hoped for, well, it does appear to be aimed at reducing the amount of taxes for the average American.
So these are the tax priorities of the Trump administration that the president has laid out for members in that meeting today. No tax on tips, which is obviously a very public campaign promise that the president made. No tax on seniors' Social Security. No tax on overtime pay. Renewing President Trump's 2017 middle-class tax cuts. Again, these are the president's priorities. Adjusting the SALT cap, eliminate all the special tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners, close the carried interest tax deduction loophole, tax cuts for Made in America products. This will be the largest tax cut in history for middle-class working Americans. The president is committed to working with Congress to get this done.
Now, we'll see how big this ends up being. Now, as you heard, the White House press secretary, she's framing this as being the largest tax cut in history for middle-class Americans. And look, this will also still need to go through Congress, and given the filibuster, well, they're also going to need some buy-in from Democrats, and we'll see if they get that. But as you might remember also, Trump has been proposing pretty massive tax cuts. This is pretty significant in terms of, regular tax policies, but it could also just be the start if he actually moves on his other plans, especially the one he's floated of replacing federal income tax mostly with cash coming in from tariffs. And look, another big idea that's being floated is the possibility of a simplified tax system. Imagine that, the big old tax doctrine taken down to maybe a few pages, right? Do away with the very, very large system and very complex and replace it with something simple enough that it would make all these, outside tax services unnecessary. But we'll see if they actually move on that. It's just something they're talking about. Look, in other news, folks, the DOGE department with Elon Musk has been making some waves with its investigations into USAID. And its next investigations into spending at the U.S. Treasury, well, they were also expected to reveal where our tax dollars have been going. But now, part of that investigation has been blocked. ABC News said in a filing late Wednesday evening, lawyers with the Justice Department agreed to a proposed order that would largely prohibit the Treasury Department from sharing sensitive financial data with Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. The agreement allows two individuals associated with Musk but employed by the Treasury Department, called special government employees, to have read-only access to the sensitive data. And it says once approved by U.S. District Judge Colleen Collar-Cotley, who is overseeing the case, the agreement will stay in place until February 24, when both sides return to the court. And it notes that the hearing followed a lawsuit filed by 3 federal unions that alleged that DOGE employees violated federal privacy laws when they accessed data from the Treasury Department, including the names, social security numbers, birthdays, bank account numbers, and addresses of taxpayers, because they can possibly see all the data in there. Now, Musk responded to the block on access to the Treasury files, and here's what he said. He said billions of taxpayer dollars to known fraudulent entities are still being approved by Treasury. This needs to stop now. And basically, he's alleging that look, they're blocking us from getting this data. Yeah, it might include personal data, but we need that because the personal data can inform us of whether these things are real or not. He's alleging that money is going to basically people in other countries who are defrauding the U.S. government. He's uncovered already billions of dollars just being stolen by foreign fraud rings. And that's what he alleges he needs this for. Now, look, folks, in other news, Border Czar Tom Homan is saying he's going to look into criminal actions against individuals who've been warning criminals and gang members about pending arrest for deportations. And look, he alleges he already spoke with the Department of Justice about taking actions on this. And here's him explaining this on Fox.
First of all, if they're shouting and helping these people get away with bullhorns, how is that legal to get help from the people in the streets? I know they can protest, but that's not what they're doing.
You're exactly right. When they come to they cross the line of impediment, and that's why I'm working very close, starting this morning with the Department of Justice, and where do they cross that line of impediment? So they may find themselves in a pair of handcuffs very soon. So working with DOGE on that, get some legal guidance on that. I'm not an attorney. I know what SecOps is about. I know what crossing that line is, but getting DOJ back up on that. So it's something we're looking at right now, Harris. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. This is not a game. When we show up these sites, this is a dangerous job for the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol and all the DOJ agencies. To have that type of interference puts our officers at great risk. Not only the officers, it puts the aliens at great risk because anything can happen when we take our eyes off the goal here. So we're addressing that immediately today. I'm addressing OPSEC today, operational security, how these leaks are happening. We've already identified how this operation got leaked. I'll deal with that today.
Now, look, in addition to this, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, is also launching investigations along these lines as well. The allegation is that at least one of the Spanish-language radio networks that were recently bought up by billionaire George Soros because Congress fast-tracked his purchase of it, and basically, the FCC fast-tracked it and allowed him to buy up tons of Spanish-language radio stations. While one of these radio stations was broadcasting the live locations of ICE agents working on deportations. And Fox News said this, is that Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr has opened an investigation into a radio station backed by left-wing billionaire George Soros that broadcasted live locations of undercover immigration and customs enforcement ICE agents, and a group backed Soros, a far-left kingmaker, purchased a stake in more than 200 Odyssey radio stations across America last year. And among them was the San Francisco-based KCBS 740 AM, which has come under fire for revealing live locations of undercover ICE vehicles and agents that were conducting deportations in the San Jose area. It says the FCC's Enforcement Bureau has already sent a formal letter of inquiry to the radio station as part of the FCC investigation, and the Enforcement Bureau proceeding is inquiring whether the radio station, which is licensed to operate by the FCC, meaning they could lose it, is violating the terms of their FCC license, which requires that they operate in public interest, meaning they can't dox federal enforcement, right? It says the formal Enforcement Bureau letter notes that the ICE agents were operating at the time in an area known for violent gang activity, suggesting their lives could have been put in danger by these radio broadcasts. On that note as well, there's also talk within the FCC to review the approval process of Soros being able to buy these 200 radio stations. And so we'll see if anything comes from that as well. But look, on all these issues of talk of going after people, blocking ICE, reporting on them, and so on, we'll see if anything gets done. Look, on one side, authorities, they've been threatening to arrest people who try to block or interfere with the deportations, and so far, we haven't seen that happen. We haven't seen arrests. We haven't seen anybody face anything other than threats. You have people actively blocking and, informing people how to not be arrested by ICE. Nothing's happening against them, right? There's a lot of threats, a lot of talk. Nothing's happening in terms of actual arrests or pressure on those people. But on the other side, look, we're just over 2.5 weeks into the new administration. It sometimes takes a little more than 2.5 weeks for legal action to take place because of the investigations and so on. And so we are being told that investigations are underway. They're suggesting that some people could face charges. And look, again, we're only just a couple weeks into this, and so, hey, a long time to go still. We'll see what happens. In other news, religious liberty could be making a comeback in the United States. President Donald Trump announced several new measures to protect the freedom of belief of Americans. And this also includes initiatives specifically to protect Christians from discrimination. And there were leaked reports and whistleblowers who had stepped forward during the Biden administration and revealed evangelical Christians, Catholics in many cases, they were being labeled in actual government documents, including even some military documents, as extremists. And some, viewed the vaccine mandates during COVID as a violation of their freedom of belief. How can you tell me I have to stick something in my body if it violates my personal beliefs? Some people argue that was a violation of that. Others have alleged that they've been targeted in various ways because of their religious standards on morality. And a lot of the debate in the country over the last few years has been a moral debate. They've faced pressure under the LGBTQ plus policies, and that does have to do with people's personal moral standards. For some people, that goes against their religion, frankly. And now seems that belief could be seeing some broader protections. Trump revealed a new executive order to create a new task force to get rid of what he's calling anti-Christian bias. And this will be led by the recently appointed Attorney General Pam Bondi. Watch.
To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias.
Now, part of the challenge that many religious believers were facing was that religion, look, it often includes moral standards. And if you have moral standards that you hold yourself to as part of your religious belief, and I would argue every religion on earth has some type of moral standard, maybe you can't eat pork, maybe you can't drink alcohol, maybe you have certain standards on, waiting until marriage before you have any kind of relations and so on. If you go against these things or force people to go against them, you're violating their beliefs. People believe some things are good, they believe some things are evil. That's part of religious belief. And the issue is, over the last few years, if you dared to say that you did not support something because it goes against your religious values, like the trans movement and so on, you risk being attacked. You were not allowed to have religious standards when it came to protected political issues. And look, some took these attacks as a direct assault on their faith. Now, look, I think the very radical gender policies that were pushed on kids in schools, that's an example of this. Some parents believed that it was violating their religious standards and the standards of their children and represented a type of religious discrimination, one under the guise, ironically, of countering discrimination. But there were a lot of other issues like this. That was just one part of many. And in my opinion, I think it's good for people to have different values. And look, one of the problems we faced until recently was that many social policies told us otherwise. We were told that we were not allowed to have different values. If you deviated from the state-sanctioned values, you could be attacked. You'd have a big target put on your back, and if you dared to express any of those values, to talk about those values, to challenge things you saw, right, going against the prevailing narratives, you would have faced pressure to keep those opinions to yourself, or you would risk personal attacks, losing your job, having your reputation destroyed in the whole 9 yards. People were not allowed to have a public statement of religious morality. And it now seems those days are coming to an end. Religious liberty could be making a comeback. And also as part of this, Trump also announced that he is creating a White House Faith Office.
I'm also creating the White House Faith Office, led by Pastor Paula White, who is so amazing. That man's happy. Look at Stan.
On this point also, Trump has promised to restore some of the religious foundations of the United States. And he's saying people of religion are going to be happy again. Watch.
People of religion are going to be happy again. And I really believe you can't be happy without religion, without that belief. I really believe it. I just don't see how you can be. So let's bring religion back. Let's bring God back into our lives. Thank you.
Now, there's been a whole movement trying to push religion out of government. This has been a long-term discussion for the United States. And a big part of this has been around the argument of separation of church and state. Technically, though, that's not law. That line comes from the personal letters of one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. And the written law, the actual law of the United States, when it comes to religion and religious liberty, that comes from our Constitution. And it basically says the government has no right to interfere with the personal beliefs of an individual. In other words, the government is restricted by the Constitution from getting involved in religion. And some argue on the other side that the restrictions against religion, churches, for example, getting involved in government, that's how it should be interpreted, right? Traditional belief, government can't interfere with religion. Modern belief, religion cannot have any involvement in government. That's the switch we've had. And look, it has actually represented a type of switch in terms of restricting religion. And some argue that it's not that religion can play no role in government. It's that government can play no role in religion. That's how it's been flipped. And so some argue the practices up until now, what we've been watching, have been somewhat of an inversion of the actual standards of the Constitution. And ironically, we've really adopted more the Soviet model. In America, right, government cannot block your religious beliefs, interfere with that. Under the Soviet Union, it was the opposite, and what is arguably what we've been practicing for the last several years. Under the Soviet Union, religion could not interfere with government. People of faith had to keep it to themselves. If you had religious views, good for you. You had to pray in your own mind and keep your faith to yourself and never voice it. And some argue that that was what was happening in the United States. A misinterpretation of the fundamental values of this country. And speaking also of the First Amendment, that also includes the freedom of the press, right? And the Justice Department, now being led by Attorney General Pam Bondi, has now dropped its criminal investigation of investigative journalist James O'Keefe, formerly of Project Veritas, and now with O'Keefe Media Group. And when James was with Project Veritas, their offices were raided by FBI agents because they had obtained the personal diary of former President Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden. Now, James O'Keefe had alleged they tried returning the diary. They tried handing it over to law enforcement prior to the raid. They wouldn't take it back. And instead, they chose to raid the offices of Project Veritas and then look into criminal charges against these people. This is James O'Keefe explaining what happened.
This just in, the Justice Department announcing today they are dropping the case against me. There will be no criminal charges in the case of the Ashley Biden diary and the investigation thereof. From the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, the government respectfully submits this letter to notify the court that the grand jury investigation that led to the charges and the issuance of above referenced search warrant into James O'Keefe's home and his reporters has concluded, based upon information currently available to the government, no additional criminal charges are forthcoming. Accordingly, the government requests the court terminate the appointment of the special master, the Honorable Barbara S. Jones. The court had appointed a special master in this case 3 years ago after they raided a newsroom's reporters' homes.
I'm sorry, so what is this regarding?
This is the search warrant. Just open up.
Let me see your hand. My hand.
Also, the U.S. government saying that the court directs the government to move to unseal the search warrant materials at the close of its investigation, and the government has no objection to unsealing those warrants.
James O'Keefe has since announced that he plans to file a lawsuit over this, and we may soon get a clear picture of how the charges were made in the first place, and also what happened behind the scenes. He has since actually released the warrants that were gotten and showed that they redacted almost the entire documents. Although they did unseal the documents, they redacted literally almost everything. Now we'll see if this also leads to similar decisions with charges for other news outlets. A lot of independent and conservative journalists and outlets were hit with legal charges under the Biden administration. In fact, most of the major conservative news outlets were facing criminal charges under the Biden administration, especially leading up to the elections. And the case against James O'Keefe getting dropped, well, it's the first major charge to come to an end. We'll see if others go along with that. But look, among Trump's day one policies was an executive order to investigate all cases of the last 4 years and all law enforcement agencies and even the intelligence agencies for any instances of politicized justice, that they were using the arms of law and the powers of the intelligence agencies to politically target people they didn't like because of their viewpoints or because they were criticizing the powers that be. And now Attorney General Pam Bondi has made a day one move to set that in action. She has now officially launched efforts within the Justice Department to review every single case of any instance of weaponized justice over the last 4 years. They're looking at everything and seeing whether there was politicization involved with that. Also, folks, in other news, we're getting more updates on the future of USAID. An acting director of the State Department, USAID now, Marco Rubio, is reportedly going to cut down the worldwide total of actually just over 10,000 employees to just under 300. So he's going to be reducing it to just under 300 staff members. I'll be talking more about this after we go back to a quick break, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
USAID could be seeing some major cuts happening. There's been a lot of attention on USAID, and we're now getting more updates on the future of USAID. That's the U.S. Agency for International Development, and investigations into the agency by DOGE and Elon Musk, they've been revealing some pretty shocking discoveries on, well, where our tax dollars have been going this whole time. With our taxes, folks, were funding transgender surgeries in Latin America. We were bankrolling Taliban opium production in Afghanistan. We were funding LGBT operas and performances in various countries. We were financing the majority of the budget of hundreds of news outlets all around the world, and not to mention bankrolling subscriptions for a lot of the big news outlets right here in the United States, and also giving huge amounts of money to various organizations deeply involved in far-left political activism, including through various proxies, Black Lives Matter. And look, a lot of people, at least among Republicans, are a little unhappy about finding all these things. And look, we'll see what happens with the actual budget for USAID going forward. A lot of this spending has, at the very least, been frozen, but the agency itself is not going away. It's now been moved under the State Department, which makes Secretary of State Marco Rubio the acting director of USAID. And he has declared that the operations of the agency will now need to be in line with the objectives of the State Department. And he has also made a big announcement as well on this. He is going to cut a massive number of jobs at USAID. The agency is going to be reduced significantly. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the jobs there are going to be cut. Now, we're not getting too many details on this just yet. Here's what we know so far, a very short piece from Reuters. It says President Donald Trump's administration plans to keep fewer than 300 staff at the U.S. Agency for International Development out of the agency's worldwide total of more than 10,000, four sources told Reuters on Thursday. The overwhelming majority cut. Right? That likely means almost the entire agency is going to get fired or, moved to other positions in different parts of the government. But remember, there's a broader move of cutting the positions of the government in general right now. And it looks like this will also be a trend in other agencies. The White House also allegedly plans to order a reduction in workforce, let's say, for the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, which, again, RFK Jr. is trying to become head of right now, still being confirmed. This will affect the FDA and the CDC, right? The Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And according to reports, we could get more details on this in the coming week. But look, this is in addition to the many federal workers who are just simply choosing to resign. And among Trump's policies is an option, they can take it, for government employees to just, take a buyout, right? They'll get paid all through September. They don't even have to work if they don't want to. All they have to do is agree to quit their jobs. We'll pay them for that long. And so far, more than 40,000 federal workers have taken that deal. Now, more could soon accept as well, although frankly, we'll see where this goes. A judge has now temporarily blocked that offer, which now has a deadline extended to Monday. So we'll see what happens with that. But also look back to DOGE and the investigations into government spending. We could see the USAID treatment, right? 10,000 workers reduced to just under 300. And of course, the revealing of a lot of misspending, let's say. We could see that used as a treatment on a policy, really, to shrink workforces in other agencies. And the DOGE department right now is also investigating Medicare and Medicaid programs. And the agency also just issued a statement saying it uncovered an estimated $100 billion in improper payments made through those programs, just in fiscal year of 2023 alone. It notes, quote, this is 43% of government-wide improper payments that year. They're finding massive amounts of fraud. They're finding lots of money that was allocated, never used, just kind of thrown into the ether and nothing ever came of it. And they're finding, of course, a lot of ridiculous spending. And also, in related to that, related news, Democrats, they were trying to subpoena Elon Musk to testify before Congress about the work of the DOGE department. Their attempt to do that has now failed. The subpoena has been dropped after it failed to pass a vote of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. And so we're not going to see that just yet. And also on USAID, the findings on how it was bankrolling news outlets, all over the world. Well, big update on that as well. The Trump administration has now declared it has ended all government money that was being used to finance news outlets through the General Services Administration. Axios said this: the White House has directed the General Services Administration to terminate every single media contract expensed by the agency, according to an email obtained by Axios. It says what they're saying, quote, GSA team, this is the organization that has now canceled all these subscriptions and other services, please do two things. Trump administration official wrote, quote, pull all contracts for Politico, BBC, E&D, which is Politico subs, and Bloomberg, and pull all media contracts for just GSA. Cancel every single media contract today for GSA only. They're all gone. Now, it's not clear whether that's all government money to news outlets. Likely there are other channels as well, like advertisements or bankrolling these so-called fact checkers. But this is a big move towards eliminating state subsidies of a lot of big media that were doing hit pieces on our own government and really interfering with the elections in terms of fake news stories, hit pieces, and the whole 9 yards. Now, folks, on a lighter note, Trump just announced he will be signing an executive order on something we all hold very dear to ourselves, which is plastic straws. He posted on Truth Social, quote, I will be signing an executive order next week ending the ridiculous Biden push for paper straws, which don't work. Back to plastic, Donald Trump has said. And remember, folks, this was a campaign promise from Trump. He said he would do this. And he was on the campaign trail saying how much he hated these paper straws where you put them in and they stick to your lips and they melt in your drink. And we need to go back to just using plastic straws. That was his big statement. Maybe we'll also see a return of incandescent light bulbs as well. He has talked about that. Remember his first term, he did bring those back. We will see. That said, let's jump into some questions. Hit the like button. You have questions, comments, leave them in the chat, and let's jump into it. All right, let's see here. Folks, what do you think of plastic straws? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Let me know. Did you try to use one of those metal straws, which kind of cling against your teeth, and you're worried if you fall over, it's going to impale you? I had one. I used it like twice, but here we are. Plastic's making a comeback, right? All right, first question. Ashley from California. You're saying Medicare fraud is huge. I had to take trainings on that because I work in healthcare. You know, I know it exists. I don't know the details of how people defraud the Medicaid and Medicare systems. I do know that a lot of illegal immigrants are somehow getting like access to it. I also saw stuff coming out, you know, especially during COVID, where, you know, you had people somehow being able to file for this stuff, even from like other countries. It was crazy. The amount of fraud that has been committed against the U.S. system is insane. You know, and I think this is kind of a shock and awe taking place. Right? I think the feeling for a lot of Americans right now is that the majority of our tax dollars we're just going to waste, fraud, and slush funds. And I mean, honestly, it's like, what are we paying taxes to? Like, I mean, and the things we do pay taxes to, they were trying to dismantle. You know, they had the defund the police movement. They were cutting fire department budgets. I mean, the schools were just turning into like communist brainwashing facilities. At least the public schools were. And so, I mean, it's really shocking what is being turned up right now in terms of what we're finding. We will see more of this, and you know, one of the big questions is going to be Trump is talking about reducing the size of government. He's talking about maybe getting rid of entire agencies, or you know, combining different agencies as a way to deal with that, which like they just did with USAID, for example. And they're also talking about cutting government spending, but you know, that needs Congress if you want to mess with the budgets. So we'll see how they end up doing this. We could also see kind of a reshifting of priorities and a reshifting of maybe, you know, transparency, so we know stuff like this isn't happening in the future. But especially, I think maybe if they're going to keep the money, at least use it for things that we know are being spent in our own interests. I do think we're going to see a lot more on this. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, why doesn't Trump just end USAID? That's a good question. I do think there are some people who want that. One sec. I do think there are some people who would rather see USAID just ended entirely. Okay, on the issue of USAID, this is the basic argument. Democrats right now, look, if you were to turn on one of the big corporate media and you want to hear what they're talking about, this is basically how it looks. A lot of the grassroots right now, the, you know, kind of nuts and bolts of the Democrat Party, the average people are protesting mass deportations. They're protesting like Trump's talk of creating the Riviera of the Middle East, where Gaza used to be. He's talking about that, right? And a lot of people are protesting these things. That's where a lot of the boots on the ground are with the average person. But if you go to the Washington system, the news outlets, the government agencies, the nonprofit organizations and all the activist groups, and of course the politicians, what are they talking about? They're hyper-focused on USAID. Now, this is starting a big debate. Why do you guys care about this so much when obviously your voters are focused on other stuff? Why are you not protesting with the people waving the Mexican flags and trying to block ICE? Why are you not out there with them? Why are you not talking about, you know, Trump's alleged, you know, genocide of Palestine or something like that? Why are they not talking about that? because when it comes to the people and the voters, that's the focus. Instead, they're focused on trying to go after Elon Musk and DOGE and trying to protect all the money going through USAID. Now, if you were to read a lot of left-wing media, this is basically what you're going to hear. You're not going to hear about any of the talks of fraud. You're not going to talk about, you're not going to hear anything about the waste in spending. You're not going to hear about, we're funding like opium production in Afghanistan or gender changes in Latin America or condoms for Hamas or something like that. You're not going to hear those things. They're going to defend and say it's conspiracy theories that media were receiving money from this. If you read most media, they're already calling that a conspiracy theory. Reporters Without Borders, RFA, they came out and even said publicly that they had a great report on it, by the way, showing that we're financing media in 30 countries around the world, including the majority of budgets of a lot of media. So this is not a conspiracy theory. But they're already calling that a conspiracy theory. And basically what they're pointing to, the only thing they're talking about is we're building schools in Pakistan and this type of thing. And then you have people in Pakistan posting videos of what those schools look like, and the roofs are collapsing, and there's no flooring, and there's like dirt floors, and the people are saying it looks like this is a barn, and this is unusable, a misuse of funds. A lot of reports like that. But they're circling the wagons around USAID right now. That's the big thing they're doing, right? Now, one of the issues they're raising as well is you're saying, well, who is Elon Musk to decide how the government spends its budget? Who is he to do this, right? He's not elected. Republicans say, well, obviously we knew we were voting for Trump, and obviously Elon Musk was campaigning right next to him the whole time, jumping up and down and sending his heart out to people, right? Obviously people knew what they were getting into. They obviously did vote not just for Donald Trump, but Elon Musk, who was campaigning right alongside him and stating publicly the whole plan they had of essentially auditing the entire federal government for spending. That was what people voted for. And of course, Elon Musk is a special government employee under a legitimate organization, which was renamed as the DOGE Department. They just took an existing agency and renamed it, so it is legal, right? The counter argument to that, though, on the other side with Republicans, is they're saying, look, you say that Congress approves the budget for these things, but Congress was being blocked from seeing what the budget was being spent on. The actual details of the spending of USAID was not available even to Congress. There were members of Congress saying they had tried auditing them. They had tried calling them to testify. They had tried finding out what they were spending our money on, and they were blocked from finding that. And so the argument of, who's in charge of spending and Congress having a role in this is kind of nonsense, because Congress did not have a role in it. Congress was not allowed to see it. Congress was blocked, possibly through illegal means, from seeing what our money was being spent on. And so, that's the other side of it. Now, I think it is an interesting move that Trump is choosing not to just fold it entirely, because I do think that a lot of people are enraged. A lot of people are very mad about it. And for a lot of conservatives and Republicans, the way they're looking at this is basically that there was a giant politicized slush fund being used to finance like 90% activist organizations against the other side of the political aisle. That it was effectively a far left, slush fund that was being used to undermine conservatives. And that's the way they feel about it, right? That is what is being highlighted in the spending. It's not all that stuff, but that's the general, argument right now. Trump's move to instead place it under the State Department will allow it to have more transparency, and it will also allow it to have more direct oversight under the State Department, which will be more in line with like actual foreign objectives of the State Department. And so, we'll see what that ends up looking like, because they're not announcing new spending just yet. Let's see, another question. Zach Seed Harpazo, you're saying Trumponomics or tariff sheriff. Yeah. So, yeah, Trumponomics is basically, I don't know, maybe Trumponomics is the tariff sheriff now. Trump seems to really love tariffs now. He says it's like his fourth favorite word, right? He loves tariffs. He says it's like the fourth most important thing, right next to like God and love, and there was another one in there. And so, Trump is all about this. Oh, in religion, right? Trump is all about tariffs now. He loves them. And my interpretation of why he loves them so very much is because, look, Trump's the art of the deal guy. What does he do well? He does negotiations well. Trump, I've actually met business people who've done business with Trump who do not like him because of this. And this is why. Trump will squeeze you. If your profit margin, let's say you want to do this huge building project, right? This was told to me directly by a guy who negotiated with Trump. You'll get Trump coming to you with an offer. Hey, build this. I want to build this with you. He will negotiate your margin, your profit margin, almost to nothing. And he'll be like, look, I'm a big brand, Trump Tower. This will look good on your resume. Yeah, you won't make much of a profit, but it'll keep your guys working. You won't lose anything. You're not going to lose anything, and you're going to have a very big, beautiful part of your resume, and you can use that to get bigger jobs in the future. It's a brand, right? And just to emphasize how much he will squeeze you, right? He will squeeze you as tight as he can in order to get, again, the costs of production down. And I think that is kind of Trumponomics, right? Trump wants to renegotiate our trade deals. He wants to get rid of a lot of the trade deficits, and he wants to make sure that, hey, Canada, maybe we need to squeeze that spending a bit. There'll be no profit, but it'll look good on your resume. You know what I mean? Maybe that's what he's doing. But I think the reason why he likes tariffs so much is because what tariffs represent, I think, are a business tool. He basically found a business tool that he can use as president in the same way he would make a business deal, right? It's like he just found the holy grail of presidential tools, and he's suddenly realizing, wow, I can use tariffs the same way I would use a contract for a building project, and I think that's how he's looking at it, really. I think he's seeing it like an art of the deal type thing. Sandy Sefkick, you're saying, love to see Trump do something as far as penalties for all these companies that allow the darn data breaches. Our freaking data is out there everywhere. Musk really can't really hurt. Yeah, well, that's another big issue. The problem you have with data breaches is a lot of it comes from hacker groups that operate in countries where we have no extradition treaty. And so, look, if you're in Russia or you're in I don't know, former Soviet states or something like that, or like North Korea or China, you can basically run a full-time business robbing, hacking, and defrauding American companies, and the personal risk to you is almost nothing. There is almost no risk unless you make the mistake of getting on a plane and traveling to a country that has an extradition treaty with the United States. Or you have the very unfortunate circumstance that your plane takes an unexpected detour and lands in a place that does have that, and you make the mistake of getting off that airplane. You know what I mean? Then you might be in trouble. But for a lot of countries, this is a no consequence crime. And so what you end up having in some of these countries is full-time businesses operating relatively in the open, doing nothing other than committing fraud and stealing data and selling data and stuff like that. Cybercrime is a full-time job in some of these countries. And the other side of it too is there's just no enforcement. This is why you have like Indian scammers in Mexico, people in Mexico running scam rings where they're doing, fake online profiles and being like, hello, I am Elon Musk. I am in the hospital. Dear, please send me $1 million. And there are people falling for it, or they do a lot of fake ransom stuff. They do all kinds of stuff like this. And for the most part, people are not facing any kind of repercussions for this. It would be possible for Donald Trump to begin demanding some kind of restitution or something for this in order to force these countries to begin taking action. For example, if Americans are defrauded by Russian hackers of a certain amount of money, then he will answer that to recover that amount to the United States through the use of tariffs or sanctions. Or if Chinese hackers steal a certain amount of data from American companies, then Trump can use tariffs to bring back an equal amount of money to our economy if China refuses to extradite them. He could very easily do this against Mexico. He could very easily do this against India in order to force these countries to break up, what are just full-time scam jobs where people run these giant scam centers, many of which operate totally in the open. He could do that. But again, the reason a lot of these things happen is because there's nothing on our side of the ocean, right? There's nothing happening in the United States to hold any of these people accountable. And, we're not engaging with the governments of those countries demanding that they do anything about it. And so it's being just basically allowed to happen. Let's see here. At Enthos 38, you're saying the Termin negotiator, that's a good one. He said he's back, right? Plus Jimmy Taylor, tax thumper, tax trumper. Yeah, he's back with a vengeance, right? I mean, look at Trump's presidential photo. I mean, it's again, his presidential photo cracks me up. When I saw it, I had to laugh because he's scowling. He looks mad. He has one eye like this, right? And look at the lighting on his photo. Look at the lighting on Trump's presidential photo. Doesn't it look like he's holding a flashlight under his chin? Right? Like the lighting is hitting like this. When you folks had like sleepovers when you were kids, do you remember like putting a flashlight under your chin to look more dramatic? Trump's presidential photo looks like he's doing that. Like, it's actually kind of funny. I can tell you at the very least they must have positioned the lighting to kind of look that way. It makes him look more intimidating. It looks like he means business, and I assume that wasn't by accident. I assume he wanted to have that image, right? Anyways, that's your president, folks. That's your president. Samuel Guzman, you're saying, Josh, what are your thoughts on Elon possibly appearing before legislators? So I mentioned that briefly. Congress already blocked that. So, brief story on this. I believe the Congressional Oversight Committee, the Democrats had issued a subpoena for Elon Musk to testify before Congress. The Republicans had blocked that. And so even though they did try to do it, it will not go through. The technicality for that is this. You do have these oversight committees, but if Republicans or Democrats want to have somebody testify before Congress, the other side has to agree to allow it. They actually cannot fully go through the process unless both sides agree. And there's oftentimes even an interview process where, let's say of course, you have a committee. There are certain rules in place to make sure the committee is bipartisan. So you have to have a certain number of Democrats and a certain number of Republicans. That's just the way it is, right? And yeah, I know that technically the political parties are not like instituted into our political system, but this is kind of the way they just do it. You're not going to have like the Independent Party or the Libertarians getting an equal seat in it, right? Republicans and Democrats. And the way it works is this. If one of them wants to call in somebody to testify, they both have the opportunity to interview that person. And if both of them do not agree to allow that to move forward, it will not happen. And so they can put on a show of demanding it. It doesn't always go through. And the exception would be that if they create the committee through possibly illegal means, where they do not allow both sides to have an equal voice, then they can do whatever they want. And that was actually one of the big arguments on the questionable legitimacy of the J6 committee when Biden was president. The J6 committee had rejected the Republican appointees, and the Democrats basically just handpicked a couple Republicans. But the Republicans they picked were people who had voted to impeach Trump, meaning they picked people who were not really among the main body of Republicans. They picked a couple Republicans who had shown through their actions that they would align themselves with the opinions of the Democrats, which did raise questions over the legitimacy of that entire committee, frankly, which will be part of the investigations into it, which are now starting. Not to say Elon Musk won't be called to testify in the future. He probably will be eventually, but we'll see. Which is not the end of the world. Do any of you ever watch those testimonies? Do any of you ever watch when they get to testify? This is how it looks. This is what this is what it looks when you get called to testify. You have the friendly party. They'll kind of ask nice questions and give you time to respond, and they're kind of softball questions. And the other side just grandstands. And they basically just read an entire spiel. And they'll be like, did you plan on this? Yes or no? Yes or no? And the person's like, you're not asking me a yes or no question. They'll be like, yes or no? And that's basically how the entire hearing looks, basically. And then people pull out clips of it, based on whatever their political views are. And it's a bit of a show, really, right? But it's good. But it's good for news, and that's often how it ends up being used, right? It's good for the news cycle, and because the media wants to use it, right? Samuel Guzman, you're saying, Josh, what are your thoughts on Elon? Sorry to ask that one. Oranges and lemons. You're saying Trumpinator, I am back, and he is. He is. He said he will be back, and he was telling the truth. He was telling the truth. He is back, right? Wow's in my pants. You're saying Elon Musk's full name is Elongated Musket. Elon Musk loves making jokes like that, actually. Yeah. NF, you're saying USAID is a tiny part of a giant budget. That is correct also. And, and actually that's a big point too. I've been talking about we've all been talking about some of the things our money's been spent on. A lot of the money on what conservatives are arguing is basically a far left slush fund. We're now seeing a lot of that did go through USAID. They were financing activist organizations. They were financing very, very far left organizations. They were giving money through proxies to some of the same sources that people like George Soros were using to bankroll the campaigns of these, they call them Soros DAs, these district's attorney who, in their practices and even in their public statements, were weighing crimes not based on the crimes themselves, but instead on the color of people's skin. Kind of the revolving door we've seen in the law enforcement system. Our tax dollars were bankrolling those people. That has now been exposed. But, the big picture is the money for this stuff is not limited to just USAID. When people think USAID, they often think foreign, we're giving money to other countries. And we're seeing some of that as well, like the crazy gender stuff that was being spent on. But actually, a lot of the USAID money, it turns out, was being spent domestically. A lot of it was going within the United States. We'll probably also see similar things with FEMA. And FEMA, Trump is actually talking about folding it. We will see if that happens. We're going to see similar things with the Treasury Department. We're now getting a picture of that. We're going to see similar things with, GSA. Trump just ended government financing of many news outlets through GSA. We're going to see the same thing through Medicare and Medicaid, especially when it comes to fraud. Elon Musk claims he's already uncovered $100 billion in fraud. And a lot of things like that. Really, when you get into the Department of Education budgets, giving money to teachers unions and Planned Parenthood, because They do a lot of the sex ed programs, for example. You know, if your kid's in public school or even private school in some places, a lot of the sex ed programs are, you know, they'll oftentimes bring in trainers from Planned Parenthood. A lot of the DEI programs were also being done through, you know, outside organizations like, you know, all these kind of far left advocacy groups, which were getting tax dollars, a lot of tax dollars. And those same groups, they get tax dollars on one side, and then they get deeply involved in political advocacy and even trying to like block, you know, through lawsuits, actions of the President of the United States on the other side. And so it does raise the questions of like, you know, are we just basically financing government operatives to act in ways that the government cannot act because of the Constitution, that it's kind of a workaround for it. And they've basically funded and operated a giant activist, you know, wing of our government under the guise of private organizations, getting funded by our tax dollars. You know, that's going to be the big thing. NF, you're saying the Red Cross, actually, that could be a big one. By the way, on that note, the Red Cross being, of course, a non-governmental organization, an NGO, Trump has now said that he's going to audit every single NGO that has been receiving government money. Because remember, they recently just cut all the government money going to the NGOs that were involved in the border crisis. Trump has now announced they're going to audit every single NGO that has been getting government money. And that's going to be big, I guarantee, very big as well. Let's see, another question here. Paul Navante, you're saying the Chinese Belt and Road system is more effective than USAID. Yeah, and you know that's kind of been one of my arguments, is people are being like, well, if we don't give money to other countries, China is going to step in and basically replace us. They're already doing it. Like, you know, because what's our money being spent on? Like, imagine you're like some hyper-conservative African nation, and a lot of them are very conservative, by the way, right? You're a very conservative African nation, and you have two choices. You can have the American money for your schools, but if you have that, you have to let Planned Parenthood come into your schools and push abortions, and you have to have these other organizations come in and tell your kids about what gender they are, right? That's option one. Or you can have the Chinese come in and build it and get you stuck in a 10-year debt trap where you lose your national sovereignty. And you're like sitting in the middle like, what do I choose? You know, pick your poison. You want to have your kids indoctrinated, or do you want to like lose your national sovereignty? Geez, maybe I'll just live in destitute still and choose neither. You know what I mean? Like, you're not being given very good options on either side. In my opinion, you know, China's not going to get involved in like funding the crazy woke stuff. They're not going to get involved in like funding the trans programs. But what they're doing already is Belt and Road. And really, if we want to compete with them on foreign interest and so on like that, we should be doing it by creating a challenge to the Belt and Road Initiative. That is what a lot of countries really want. And even some countries that are very friendly to the United States, by the way. I know I talked to people in Brazil when Bolsonaro was still president. And, you know, Eduardo Bolsonaro, he was actually saying, according to some of my Brazilian friends, that, you know, he was kind of caught in a difficult position because he did not want to work with China. But because America did not really have a strong infrastructure program through an aid program, they needed money and they needed business, and they were going to China, right? They were really debating it. If the United States wants to really push back against them, we should create something similar to the Belt and Road Initiative that serves American interest and the interests of the country we're going to without debt traps involved, which you do that alone and you'll beat out the CCP. Do that alone and you will push the CCP out. And also make it so you create local jobs, because the way the CCP contracts often work, as soon as you default on it, it shifts in ownership to China. The the interest rate policies are established, so it's almost impossible to not have it default and switch to ownership of China. If they build it, Chinese workers build it, meaning they get all the money for construction, and also they run it, which means they get the jobs, not the country. It's a horrible deal. It's a horrible deal. But countries agree to it because they need the infrastructure. America, if we really wanted to do well, we could use the same money we've been spending through these programs if we really want to have like a foreign aid program, and we could win all over the world. We could do great things if we went that route without the bad elements of the CCP, and we would push the CCP out of it. Becky Pacas, you're saying Elon doesn't need confirmation. The Senate is treating those who do terribly. There's no reason to go at it this time. J6 committee was entirely selected by Pelosi. No minority input. That was accurate. Yeah. On the point of the Senate confirmation hearings, it's true they're trying to block it. They delayed, the Democrats, they delayed the confirmation of Kash Patel until next week. It was supposed to happen this week. So we'll see if Kash Patel wins the nomination to become the new FBI director. It's looking so far like he might have the votes, although we will see. But it is true on Elon Musk that he does not need confirmation. The way that Trump went about the hiring of Elon Musk, he campaigned with them. Voters knew what they were voting for because he was on the campaign trail jumping up and down right next to Donald Trump. They knew what they were voting for. He said what he was going to do. They voted for that. So the argument that he's not elected is nonsense. People voted for it. Also on the confirmations, he's not going to an agency that would require a confirmation. Technically, the DOGE department is the renaming of an existing government department that does not require a confirmation to lead. And Elon Musk was brought in as a special government employee, legally on paper, which makes it so that he can be hired for, like, I believe 120 days. And that is the legal process. It actually is legally solid, what they're doing. All right, folks, that said, thank you so much for being here. It is Friday, so enjoy your weekend. I'll be back on Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, we have a new show that airs every Friday. It's called Prime Time. You can join that tonight. We're going to be premiering it again. Let us know what you think of it also. Prime Time is myself. It's Roman Balmakov, who does Facts Matter, Tiffany Meyer, Chris Bob from NTD, Cindy Drew here. It's a great show, great conversations, a little more relaxed, but I hope you all enjoy it. Again, that airs tonight, so don't miss it. And that said, have a good weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Please share this video, give us a like, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.